So namaste and greetings, Annette Greenwood, and welcome to the author experience conversations that we have with inspiring authors like yourself every Sunday. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. I'm excited to see how things unfold.
Pleasure having you with us, Annette, and a warm welcome to all the people who've joined us on Facebook Live to discuss insights from Annette's book, Imprisoned Heart, and also about the work that she does with people who are incarcerated, especially women who are incarcerated. So welcome once again, Annette, and to begin with, like we do with every author, we would like to invite you to share with us 7 descriptors that would define Annette Greenwood as an individual. These descriptors could be nouns, pronouns, verbs, adverbs, adjectives, values, principles, roles, responsibilities, one word or a set of words. So let's begin. What would the 7 descriptors be that define Annette, the individual, the person?
I'm just going to say these as they come from the heart, okay? So, strong,
Strong,
empowered,
strong,
resourceful, strong, empowered,
empowered,
resourceful,
sorry,
resourceful.
I didn't
So
get that.
resourceful. So I have to be resourceful.
Resourceful, all right.
Yeah. Compassionate.
Compassionate,
Yeah.
all right.
Caring.
Caring,
Adventurous.
adventurous, all right.
Soulful.
Sorry,
Soulful from the
so
heart.
soulful,
Soulful.
all right. So that's 7. So
Is
now
it?
unpack those words. What do you mean by strong? How would you unpack strong? What does that descriptor kind of pack in for
Okay.
you?
So for me, living and working where I worked many years ago, I worked in a very male-dominated environment.
Right.
And as a woman back in the 80s, women were still very not allowed to speak and say what they thought,
Mm-hmm.
even here in the UK. So I had to learn to be strong and to stand up for what I believed in, and to say what I thought was right and wrong, and to define the difference. I didn't tolerate bullying or anything like that. So I felt I had to learn to be strong in order to show other women that there is another way. You just don't have to accept.
So what I'm hearing you say is that in a very patriarchal society, to to have your voice heard as a woman, you
Yeah.
needed to be strong to voice your expression, to voice your dissent, to voice what you felt. Is that
Yeah.
what you're trying to unpack? Very nice. And I think a lot of women in India would echo your sentiments, because like the UK or the US, uh, India is also a very patriarchal and also very misogynistic society.
Mm.
Okay. So and then you said soulful, which was your 7th descriptor. How would you unpack soulful?
So I have learned to tap into my heart and soul to seek the answers that I often looked for outside of me. So, having had severe depression, and I'm happy to share that if you want me to at some point, I was in a really dark place and I lived in my head all the time. I always looked to my head for every answer, and I was stuck there. I was imprisoned heart. I just didn't know where to go. So I've learned over the years through meditation, through my spiritual practices, to come into my heart and my soul and find the answers and live from that place rather than a place of conflict in my head.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you found your space of calm and a space where you can be, even if there's negativity around you, it does not affect you anymore, because you found a place within yourself where you
Mm.
can kind of retreat to and stay calm even in a conflicting environment.
Yes, and I mean,
And
not every.
how did you go about the process of mastering this? Share the secret with us.
Oh, great. So the secret is that at one point I was really in not a good place, and I mean not a good place, Jerry. I was on the point. I was suicidal at one point,
And thank you for
and I just
sharing that with so much candor.
it's not. I'm happy to share that if it helps somebody else.
it,
And
it, it
I
it shows that you have adopted and practiced the power of vulnerability. Very nice. Go ahead.
absolutely
Yes.
thank you. And I was in this really bad place, as I say. I'd been there before, and I'd not got out of it properly, and I'd been offered antidepressants by my GP and my doctor, and I just did not want to go down the road of antidepressants, and I was trying varying things, and none of them were particularly working long term. And then I fell upon a synchronicity, as I would call it, in a newspaper. I saw an advert for something called adaptation practice. And the adaptation practice, I contacted the guy who set it up, and he was a GP here in the UK, but he had practiced and trained in Buddhist, the way of living as a Zen Buddhist. So I thought, what have I got to lose? I've got to get past this point, and I don't know where to go. So I went to see him, and the first thing he said was, don't sit here telling me all your problems. Don't sit here crying about what's happened. We are going to focus on the here and now, and we're going to focus on your learning to accept these burning emotions that are going on inside, these voices in your head that are telling you are rubbish and you're no good at anything, because that was part of the conflict. My head was always telling me, you're rubbish, you'll never be any good at life. And that was reinforced by school and education. And here this man was telling me there was a way out of this. And I was, show me the way and I'll do it. And I had to learn to adopt a very disciplined way of life, including, a timetable about getting up and going to bed, learning to, if I felt this overpowering emotions coming up, not expressing them, not throwing anything, not screaming, but learning to accept and live with them in my body. I'm not saying that's easy, but over time, it was about a month of working this practice, and I started to see light where all I'd seen is darkness and, being engulfed by emotions all the time. But this was a way that set me free. And it sounds quite exhilarating, because it is. It set me free to live my life out of my head into my body.
So a coach or a person who counseled you made all the difference in your life, because
Yeah.
that's what we do as coaches. We don't focus on the negativity of the past. We focus on the here and now, and you basically focus on the person's thinking, so that you can make the person think about their own thinking and how they can improve their thinking, because with their improved thinking, they can think of a brighter solution to the future. And I think that's the process and sessions that you went through with your coach or your counselor. So how long back was this?
So it was 22 years, and I still work with him today. I'm on that path, and I still continue growing and evolving, and I don't get it right all the time. I'm not perfect, and I do
Right.
make mistakes, but they're
Right.
never called a mistake. They're called learning from it and then moving forward. And that's what I try to do and live by every day.
Right. And none of us are perfect, because perfection, like I always say, is the biggest lie of the world. No one or nothing can be perfect, right?
No.
The whole idea is continuous improvement. How do you keep on working on yourself and continuously improve? One of the insights I'm getting from this conversation is that what you spoke about, when you were in this dark place, is basically the lack of self-esteem,
Mm.
and the feeling that you're not good enough, which today is unfortunately a widespread phenomena in the world. People don't have the self-esteem, and I always say this, that if you notice what's happening on social media, all the
Mm.
Instagram reels or Facebook reels, where people do some funny kind of dances and activities and post it on social media, over there for likes and validation, because the entire concept of self-esteem is there's a self before the esteem, which means that the validation should come from within. And maybe the few people who are in your inner circle, the few near and dear ones, family and friends. But if you're looking for validation from one to many, it leads to mental and emotional illness. Any insights that you want to share on this, since you've gone through that phase, so that people who are battling with the lack of self-esteem can understand how they can make themselves stronger and how they can kind of develop and improve on their self-esteem?
There's two things I'm happy to share, and I can touch on them both in a bit more detail if you wish. The first thing is that my first marriage was domestic violence, and I was only very young when I got married. I was only just 18. That was the first time, and there was so much put down that my self-esteem took a really bad hit. You know, there was name calling, there was physical violence, there was all sorts of things went on, and that is what led me on this path. But I'll go back to the point you made. What worries me, Jerry, these days about social media, Instagram, is that they have these women on there who look perfect. The photoshopped or whatever technology they use to do it. And I've worked with young women who've said to me, well, my more if I'm allowed to say this, my breasts and vagina aren't right. They're not perfect. And so I'm asking the question, what does this look like? What is a perfect breast and perfect vagina? Where is this coming from? Well, I've seen it on social media that you have to have this and this done in order for a man to want to be with you. And I was like, my answer to that is, if any man wants to be with you, they're going to take you and love you for who you are, not because you've had a nip and a tuck in all the wrong places that nature didn't intend you to do. And that really concerns me. And I think one of the most important things for women to remember is that this might sound a bit woo-woo or airy-fairy, but that self-love, it starts with me. It always does start with me. You know, you're looking for validation, as you say, for somebody else to tell you something, but it's got to start with me. I've got to love and accept Annette Greenwood just as she is, with this hair colour, with the fact that I wear glasses, with the fact that I might have a wonky tooth, whatever. I have to accept all those little parts of me that make me who I am. And that's the basis, the fundamental basis of how I learned to love and accept Annette Greenwood for my esteem to grow, self-esteem to grow, sorry.
Right. So thank you for sharing that. And, India has similar issues where a lot of women face domestic violence, and not just physical domestic violence, but mental and emotional domestic violence through gaslighting. And I think that's exactly what you have been through with your first marriage, which you said was at the age of 18. And I guess it's the male dominance and the patriarchy which is at work, whether it's places like India or so-called progressive or civilized cultures like the UK, which is a notion that that a country projects, because what it is deep within is the same domestic violence and the misogyny that is faced by women in India, right? And that's what I'm hearing you say. So thank you for sharing that with so much candor, and thank you. And I'm sure it'll help a lot of people who are watching, especially the women, about how they can work on developing and improving their own self-esteem. And I like the concept of self-love, because if you do not love yourself, how do you expect others to love you, right? So yes, it's very important to love oneself, to also learn to accept oneself with all our flaws, because like they say, it's you can either be flawful or you can be flawsome, right? So with that, Annette, I invite you now to share your story, your life journey, right from childhood to now, and everything that has transpired in between. uh, what is the story of your life? Tell us your story in around 9 to 10 minutes. So the virtual stage is yours, the exclusive screen time is yours. I'll just be a fly on the wall. So over to you, Anna, to tell us your story right from childhood to now and going forward.
Tell me when I've got 5 minutes left, Jerry, and I'll know where to
Yes,
go
yes.
with it.
You have 9 to 10 minutes overall, so you can take your time. Yeah.
Okay, so my childhood, I came from a very poor background in terms of financial wealth and things like that. My parents were very working class. I was brought up in the 50s. We didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of anything really. It was very hand to mouth, but we're very happy as children. You know, my parents were very loving, although they argued quite a lot, and that was probably an influence on my life at a very, very young age. I At school, I didn't excel because I hated it. And I want to be honest and say, I just couldn't get my head around things like maths or English or history when all I wanted to do was go outside in nature, play football and pretend. I wanted to pretend play that I was an actress because my dream was to be an actress from a very young age. That's what I wanted to do. And so I would do those kind of things. So I didn't excel brilliantly at school. I was bullied as well, which is quite standard, isn't it, in most schools? So those kind of experiences, I guess, shaped me without my actually realizing it. And then when I grew into a young woman and I wanted to start going out and expressing myself and finding out what was going on in the world, my mother was quite domineering. So she would, you know, it was really strict rules. If I wasn't in by a certain time, I was grounded for a month, you know, no pocket money, all sort of hard disciplines to learn at a very young age. And then I saw a way out. Only my way out was a mistake. It was probably one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made, but it also turned out to be a blessing in disguise. So at 15, I met somebody through, I was working, I'd started working at 15, I'd left school, and I went to work for a newspaper in the printing department, and I met somebody there. He was much more experienced in the ways of the world. I was a young 15-year-old virgin, you know, it sounds wonderful and idyllic. So I got into a relationship with him, and I was just so unworldly in the ways of the world, and I left home to go and live with him in his parents' house because he was, you know, come and live with us. You can just do what you want, you know, your mum won't be able to tell you what to do. So I went to live with him, and within a few short months, I was being smacked around the head. That was my first experience of any domestic violence. And I just knew this wasn't right. I'd never been brought up with this. And it took me some months, but I managed to get back to go and live with my parents again. And he hounded me, followed me for a while, but my parents, you know, they just kept going to the door and saying, no, keep away from her. And I thought I loved him. I thought, oh, this is my first love, but actually it wasn't. It was just a silly, childish mistake. But that was one of the first things. I then, only 2 years later, met my first husband. He came from a family of, he was a gypsy background, like a Romany background. And I had this fantastic idea that he was going to be all romantic and wonderful, and he wasn't. So we were married in a few short months, and I quickly found out in a matter of weeks that it was going to turn out to be another violent relationship, only this time much more severe. And again, I was 18, and his family wanted me to have a baby straight away. And so I had to hide my birth control pills under the carpet on the stairs out of the way. And I would run on a night and take these pills because I just knew this was the wrong thing, and I didn't want to have any children at that stage in my life. So long story short, I ended up one particular night in the hospital after a particularly violent attack. I actually hit him back as well because I picked the alarm clock up and I whacked him over the head with it so I could escape out the house and run round the corner to where my parents lived. I ended up in hospital, and I was laid on that hospital bed, all sort of battered and bruised, and, you know, where am I going? What am I doing? This kind of thing. And then I just had this insight from inside I had to get out, I had to leave, I had to have courage and go. And that's what I did. I got out of the hospital, I had the courage, I packed my bags and I went, and I never went back. And I went to stay with my parents. And then my started to evolve and go out and find new friends and new relationships, that kind of thing. And then I'm fast forwarding quite a bit because I know the time frame. And I started to work, I got a job and everything, and I stayed in this job for nearly 20 years. And throughout that 20 years, I kept having these dips of depression. And the worst time it came was I'd met my current husband. We were married. We were living in York, which is a city not too close by here. And we were having to move to a different area. And at the same time that move came, I was made redundant. And now that was just the end of my world, because it was what I saw as my security. It was a safe place. I'd been there 20 years. What was I going to do? Yet inside me, there was something saying, but there's more. There's something you need to be doing and you're not doing it. You're worth more than this. But in my head, there was that, no, you're not. You've got to stay working in a dead end job doing absolutely nothing because you're worthless. So there's this conflict going on, which is then when I got into a really bad place. We moved over here to this area and the suicidal thoughts were coming. And at one point, I was driving the car down a country lane, and the voice in my head was saying, go on, run off the road with the car. You're not worth it. Run off the road. Go on. And there was just like this, all of a sudden, I grabbed the steering wheel and I pulled the car back and I banged the steering wheel and I shouted, no, I will not. I am not going to do this. And that was it must have been a turning point in my head. And that's when I sought the help from Dr. Sherlock, as his name is. I sought the help from him and my life started to change. Now, as that changed, my inner being changed and I became much more compassionate and caring and loving and towards myself. And I wanted to help other women. But if I've been through this and I'm coming through the other side, there must be so many other women who are in this same position as I am and don't know what to do. And I found a job working for a charity, a non-for-profit, and I set up projects for anybody who was vulnerable, be it man, woman. I worked with younger people in colleges, but all around this theme of helping people to overcome their own adversities. I trained as a coach, and the training I'd done in the Buddhist training and I was still working with was helping me all the time to change and grow. So I'd set up all these projects, and then I had a wonderful phone call out of the blue from a women's networking organisation who'd heard about my work. And they said, would you be interested in coaching in the women's prison? And I thought about it for about 1 second and I said, well, I'd love to. So I went to work in this prison, which was an open prison. And one of the things about women, and that I'd had a group of friends who were saying about, I found them being so judgmental to women who were either living in domestic violent relationships or there were streetwalkers, prostitutes. And I felt it was so wrong that they were judging these women without knowing anything about them at all. And when I went to work in the prison, in the back of my mind was, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book about triumph over adversity. I didn't know how and I didn't know when. And when I went to work there at the prison, it was the first person I ever worked with was a really lovely soul, and she was a prostitute, and she'd been a prostitute for many years, and she turned to prostitution. At the time in the UK, there was this guy going about called the Yorkshire Ripper, and he was just going out and killing prostitutes. It was a massive story at the time. I think he only died just recently. And I was like, this is fascinating. And the funny thing is, every woman I worked with, I could see myself in. Not that I'd been a streetwalker, but I could see her pain and her trauma. The next person I worked with might have been in for they'd murdered somebody because of the domestic violence situation. And it was almost like this was my training ground for my coaching practice and also the theme for the book that I would eventually write, but I just didn't know it at the time. And it was almost like the universe was putting these synchronicities right in front of me for me to be able to put this out into the world and share it with other people so that they could too know how to overcome their own adversity. So I carried on this work there. And then I realized that when women come out of prison, there was nothing there for them. So I set a project up, and it was called the Catalyst Project, the Catalyst for Change. And within that project, I sourced mentors and coaches and education and everything that would take these women from where they were once they'd come out of prison to where they needed to be, whether it be somewhere to live, a new way of thinking, as you were saying earlier, learning to love themselves and accept themselves so that they too could actually get their lives on track and change them for the better, no matter how bad or how dire their their situations had been. And so I set this project up, and that continued, and it continued to evolve. I worked on that for a number of years. But then I was also doing my private coaching as well, and I was drawn to write, and I was writing whilst I was in the prison. I was writing because I was working. I couldn't do what many authors can do, which was do it full time. So I was having to write around my job, write on a weekend, write on my days off, write on holiday, carry on working while I was growing everything I was doing. Writing articles for magazines and things like that. And we'd also, moved to this new area still, and I was still finding my feet because it was very different from living in a city to living in a rural area. It's much more close-knit communities, and everything was changing and evolving, and I was getting more and more interested in obviously mental health because of my own, and I could see I was getting better. I was well on track then, and I wanted to help others. And I was doing things like, teaching meditation classes, learning how to Qigong and Tai Chi, very much into anything holistic, looking at my diet, looking at whatever I could do to make those little changes that didn't cost a lot of money. And this is for anybody listening as well, Jerry. We didn't have a lot of money, and I couldn't afford to go out and, buy lavish things. It was all and I found for me, a simple lifestyle was the thing that helped me the most. Keeping things simple, keeping grounded, and doing all those wonderful things that make me who I am now. And at the moment, I'm doing some more Qigong training and some more coach training, but it's ever evolving. It never really stops. And that growth, I have this burning desire all the time inside to seek and to search and to share. And that's kind of where I find myself at now. I'm hopefully going to be starting some podcasts in the not too distant future to share what I've learned and invite other people in to share their experiences and tips so people can go away with something insightful but practical to do in their own lives. Have I run out of time yet? Keep going. Have I run out? I've got 10 minutes. Have I lost you, Jerry? I think we might be frozen. Are we back?
Yes, go ahead.
Whew. So I don't know where I've got to now in the time frame that I've been given. Have I gone to 10 minutes?
No, you can go ahead. You have 1 minute more. You can just wrap it up.
Whew. So where I am now is, I don't know which bit you heard or didn't hear. I'm training, doing some more coach training. I'm training, doing some Qigong training. My journey, because I'm a Golden Door ambassador as well, I'm helping to write a program for women. So everything there still evolving, supporting and helping women grow. Have I lost you again? Are we back? Are we back? Yeah, we're back again. No.
Yes, go ahead. Can you hear
We're
me?
back again. Yeah.
Yes.
So yes, everything that I can do within my power to help other women, young women, older women, at whatever age. And one of my sayings is about not letting age hold you back. Don't let it hold you back from trying to pursue your dreams and your ambitions in life. Find the right person to help you, whether it be me, you, a video off the internet, or something that starts you off to get you on the path to discovering yourself and who you really are. We keep losing each other, don't we? I'm hoping you're there in the background somewhere. Are we back?
Yes, we are back, and there's some problem with the internet. I think there's
It's okay.
some Wi-Fi lag happening. Anyway, thank you so much for sharing your story, and thank you for sharing all your insights from your life. Uh, Tell us a little more about your work with the incarcerated.
Okay. So part of what I did when I first went into the prison, I wasn't quite sure what was going, how it was going to unfold. But the project itself would look at where the woman was and where they wanted to go. And so on one occasion, I'll use this as a good example. On one occasion, I was working with a youngish woman, probably in her 30s or 40s. And my job was never to ask why they'd been incarcerated. That was not supposed to be part of the deal, because I didn't want them to think that that was the only thing I was there for. It was about, this is the woman. I take the woman at face value for everything. And I met with this woman. Let's just say her name was Jane. And I said, right, okay, so my name's Annette. Where are you now? And well, I know where you are now. Tell me a little bit about what you want to do when you leave prison. How can I help? What are your aspirations? Well, she said, I've been in prison quite a long time. So I'm fearful of going outside of the prison gates. She said, and I'm fearful that how society will look at me because of my past. And I said, well, look, I don't ask this question, but if you want to tell me why you're here, that's totally fine. You can tell me why you're here. Now, I'm not sure whether I've still got you, Jerry, or whether I'm just talking to the screen.
No, you are talking to me. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's all right. Just checking. And she said, well, I was in a relationship where it was domestic violence. She said, and for years and years and years, my husband would beat me. He would beat me on a regular occasion every single night. And she said, and I would ring the police, and the police would say, well, it's domestic violence. We don't come out for domestic violence. You're going to have to just learn to do what your husband says, and all the kind of stuff you've heard before. So I said, so what happened? And she said, well, on one particular occasion, my little girl came into the kitchen and my husband was beating me, and he didn't stop. He carried on doing it in front of my daughter. She said, and I snapped. You can do what you like to me, but not in front of our child, not in front of an innocent 3-year-old. So she said, I snapped. She said, I quickly scurried my daughter out of the kitchen. She said, and then I stabbed him. I just grabbed a knife from the side and I stabbed him and I killed him. So, I mean, where do I go with that? Where do I go with that, Jerry, at the time? So I said, I'm so desperately sorry that this has happened. And do you know what she said? She said, it's totally fine. I'll tell you why it's totally fine, Annette. She's because, and I'm not sure whether you have it in India, Jerry. It's called the Samaritans. We have it here in the UK. And you listen to people who are in a desperate state. And she had trained to become a listener in the prison for other women going through really difficult times. And she was also training to be a counsellor, which was wonderful. So she was not in too bad of a place, but her fears were about how were society going to see her? How were they going to see her on the outside? And what would happen is they would be able to go and work before they actually left prison. They could go and work in the community, doing gardening or anything. And I remember picking a newspaper up, and I saw on the front of this newspaper a picture of this woman, and the headline was about murderer released. And I could just imagine what was happening there within the general public's perception of her. She was going to be somebody who was really bad. She should have stayed behind bars forever. Remember, after all, she's murdered somebody. Why is she allowed to come out? Why is she allowed to work in the community? And that very same week, I went to see her, and she'd seen it. She'd heard about it. And she said, she put her hand up and said, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is how I'm going to be viewed when I go outside of the prison. And I said, look, this is where we need to start on your journey going outwards, because at the end of the day, in this life, there'll always be somebody who will find something to judge you for, whether it's because you wear glasses, because you've got blonde hair, because of your age. And I know this is a little bit different because this is, we're talking about people talking about murder. But at the end of the day, somewhere you have to learn to forgive yourself for what you've done. Despite all the counselling work you've done and all the listening, you haven't learned to forgive yourself. Forgive yourself first, and then we can work on the rest. And we can you can learn to turn a blind eye to what people will say, because you are always going to get this because of your past. Sadly, it's a real fact, Jerry, isn't it? People always pick on something you've done in the past. And she was just one example of how the system, if you like, or how she was fearful of going back into the real world. She didn't even know how much it cost for sanitary products, because she was so used to everything being done for her inside, your meals prepared and all the rest of it. She just had no understanding of what life was like outside. So I had to kind of bring her into the 21st century of what life is actually outside prison, because in those surroundings, in some ways, to many people, whether it be man or woman, it's a safe place.
Right.
And I know people who've gone back because it's the safest they feel, because they cannot cope on the outside world. They don't know where to go. They
Right.
don't know what to do.
So I think that's very important work to do. So what you're doing basically is helping inmates who are incarcerated, especially the women, to prepare for life outside as and when
Yeah,
they come out. And another insight that I picked from what you just shared is most people don't understand the power of listening. And like I always tell people, listening is not only a forgotten art, but it's a science that most people don't understand. And the Chinese knew about this centuries ago, where they said, listen with a virtuous heart, because you don't just listen with your ears, you listen with your eyes, and you listen to the person's emotions, the tone, the feelings in the voice, right? And one of the things that we plan to do as a part of our Rex Karmavir Global Fellowship mission, and you are a Rex Karmavir Global Fellow and our Karmavir Chakra Award recipient, is to train and certify people to become ACE listeners. And
mm,
ACE is an acronym, which is how do you actively listen? A is active listening, comprehensive listening, that is the C, and the E is empathic listening. And we plan to skill people for these listening skills, so that we can have an army of listeners who are just listening to people to help them cope with their emotional, mental concerns and issues. So tell me, Annette, I write books which tell true stories of real heroes. and that is called the Karma Curry series, right? So it's a franchise called Karma Curry that we've created, and now it's a book series, and we also have Karma Curry Woman Power and Kid Power. So there's a series within the series, and then we have the Mojo Inspirator book, which is all about self-help. How do you understand the mindsets, the virtues, and the powers of highly proactive, effective, and productive individuals? And that's how we kind of learn from the stories, and you know develop those life leadership and learning to learn lessons. And my next book, which is launching, is called Weekends with Zoe, which is the story of a 16-year-old dying girl who appointed me as a life coach, and the few conversations that I had with her in the last 12 to 13 weeks of a life. So what is the theme of your book, Imprisoned Heart? What inspired you to write this book? I know you do a lot of work with the inmates, because this book, again, the protagonist is a person who's imprisoned, and then you also have a title called Imprisoned Heart. So what is the central theme of the book, and do you want to tell us a little more about the book now?
So the theme again, I guess it runs through my life story and the experiences that I've had with domestic violence and being imprisoned in my head. And then when I went to work within the prison system, and I worked with that first woman very, very closely for a number of months, and she was sharing her story about how being a prostitute was the most unglamorous thing ever, and how she had to, when she was having sex with her clients, her customers, she would have to push down, which is what I did, not have sex with her customers, but push down all the emotional baggage that I'd accumulated over the time I'd been in my marriage. And each time I worked with her, it just reinforced everything that had happened to me. And I found it sometimes very difficult and very challenging. And it would bring up painful emotions for me, because I was having to go through I was reliving what she was living now. But I think that's part of being a good mentor and a good coach, because you are living, you're going through everything that they're going through. And so having this woman in front of me sharing all her insights about her life, and how she'd been sent out onto the streets in the freezing cold, and a pimp had kicked her when she got back to her hotel because she hadn't earned enough money. And that theme was a common theme for everybody, all the women I worked with, I should say. There might not have been prostitutes, but they all had an imprisoned heart. They had all wrapped this barbed wire around the front of the hearts because they'd been hurt so many times, and were afraid to open them because they were afraid of what they may feel. So that was the inspiration and the theme behind it, if that makes sense.
Very nice, excellent. So it's basically about how your heart is imprisoned because you are in a dark place. You are in a marriage which is loveless, which has a lot of violence, and that's where you feel that your heart and your soul has been imprisoned. So
Yeah,
do you want to read a couple of paragraphs from the book for the benefit of the readers?
I've got one here.
Sure. Please show your book also to all the readers,
But
to all
that
the
is
people
it.
who've
That's
joined
not
us
the
on
one, and that's
Facebook.
my own version. That's my
Annette
own.
Greenwood's book, Imprisoned Heart, is
Yeah.
available on Amazon and at leading bookstores around the world. And the tagline, like you would see, is, "If you dare to believe, anything is possible, even from a prison cell." So yes, Annette, please do read a couple of paragraphs from the book for the benefit of the readers before we
The
then kind of conclude with the process of writing that you kind of employed
Okay.
to write your book.
So the paragraph I've chosen, Jerry, is when she's first gone into into prison, and she's innocent. So she's gone to prison wrongly accused because the man she thought she was in love with has set her up. He's a drug smuggler, and she's been caught at the airport. She's now been banged in prison for 12 months, and she's shouting her innocence to the whole world. So she's now been thrown into this cell, and she can hear somebody next door saying about they're going to self-harm, they're going to cut themselves if the prison officers don't let them out. So Katrina is laid in her cell and she's covering her ears. She's drifting in and out of sleep with her head aching from crying. She was exhausted and lay there for hours in the darkness. She was afraid and isolated. And even though she wasn't, she felt every inch a criminal. Yes, she'd been a hooker. She'd seen no other way out of helping her mother. Was that so wrong? She hadn't hurt anyone. She hadn't burgled anybody, and neither had she stolen from a soul. Yet there she was, treated as though she'd committed murder. What had started out as a way of helping her family had turned into a nightmare. She knew that if her lover Simon had never come on the scene, none of this would ever have happened. How could she have been so gullible, so stupid as to have fallen for his lies? It was clear to Katrina that he had used her. He must have been planning this all along. He was a wise boy. He knew what he was doing. And after all, who better to do his dirty work than a prostitute? And that's the paragraph I've chosen.
Very nice, and thank you for reading that out to us, Annette. And to conclude, we had shared with you a PowerPoint about storytelling, what we call as the storytelling tutorial, right? And any good story has a plot that requires the hero, the villain, and the victim, right? And Joseph Campbell mastered this in his book called The Hero's Journey. And the hero's journey, if you see, has 12 steps to it, right? You staying in the ordinary world, and then you have the call to adventure, then you have the first refusal, which is your hesitation to actually step out to do something, and you're an adventurer yourself, and then you have a mentor, a helper who kind of helps you to cross the threshold and tests who are your allies, who are your enemies, and then you kind of approach the situation to make a difference. And that's the basic process that Joseph Campbell followed, and a lot of script writers and story writers and novelists, actually employ this method in writing their books. Whether it is Harper Lee with To Kill a Mockingbird, right? And you can see the Kill a Mockingbird story over there, right from Atticus Finch's call to adventure, his refusal, because he feels that if he helps a black man, then all the people from the white community would go against him. So what is the process, what is the approach that you employed when you were writing your book Imprisoned Heart? And what are the basic fundamental lessons that you would like to share with people who aspire to become authors, aspire to write books?
The first thing I would say is never give up, Jerry. Never give up, because I had so many setbacks when I was writing it and when I was trying to get published. And one of the things that inspired me to keep going was reading The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Not so much the book, but because he had himself had struggles to overcome to get to be an author. And I just kept that in my sights all the time. So I would always say, never give up, no matter what, just keep going. And I'd like to be honest from my heart and say, the theme that I used, although I didn't know it at the time, there's the heroine, the victim, and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't know that it was Joseph Campbell's the hero at the time. But I knew that I had this sense of the call to adventure was about Katrina turning to prostitution, and she also meets the man that she falls in love with, and then she's set up by this other guy who's the baddie. He's the baddie in all of this, and acceptance. She's not accepting going to prison, given a prison sentence, and there was obviously there's all the story with it. But the theme for me was each time I was working with this woman, this was what I was writing. This is what was happening, and I was going through that stage by stage, and I was writing, as I say, 2 days a week, because that was the only opportunity I had, and I disciplined myself and I would get up on a morning and I would start to write, and I would just keep writing all day, go for breaks and things, and it would just flood out. It would just flood out of me, and then I would put it into the paragraphs that made sense. But it did have a flow to it. So the mentor side of it, the hero, not so much the hero, but I was the hero because I was going into the prison to help Katrina. Yet Katrina was also having her own dark night of the soul, and she's fighting the system. And she's targeted by prison officers, and there's people wanting sexual favors, and they're threatening her. And then the mentor Sam comes in, and I think this is a bit about crossing the threshold where the prison system was corrupt, and there was bullies, and she's attacked and ends up ending up in prison, taken to hospital, and while she's in hospital, she's thinking about the man that she really loves, the first man that was her first client. That's who she's in love with in her heart. She's so mistrusting of everybody. She doesn't trust the system. She doesn't trust anybody. She's only just learning to trust the mentor. But she finds solace in holding this necklace that she's wearing with a cross. She's actually an atheist. She has no religious beliefs in anything. But that cross gives her some solace to work with, the enemies and everything that she's feeling in her life. And as part of her transformation, she's working with the mentor, and she's learning to let go. She's learning to move out of her head into her heart. She's learning forgiveness of her past life. She's learning forgiveness from her attackers, from her days as a prostitute when she's been beaten by some of her clients. And she's learning to find out who she is. And then as part of the journey, as it's evolving, she has a shock as her first love, her first client, comes back in. So that's the ordeal side of it. He comes to the prison. He's been looking for her and doesn't know where she is, and he turns up one day, and it's a massive shock for her. And he actually confronts her and tells her that he loves her. She's like, no, this is not, I don't want this. She's kind of fearful of everything, fearful of trusting him, because her heart's only just starting to open. But he throws down the treasure. He throws open his heart to her, and he tells her how much he loves her, and she's declining through fear. And then on the hero's journey, she's now the hero, and the road is coming to an end in her prison. The sentence is over, and she's reflecting. This is her day of release. She's reflecting on what might happen when she goes out of the prison, because her life has changed. She has changed. She's transformed, and she's growing. But outside of the prison, her first love is waiting for her, and he stood there, with open arms, and he's saying to her, "Come to me. Let's do this together. I love you. You love me. Let's make this work." I can feel myself getting quite emotional about it now, because it just brings up the whole joy of writing this. And the reward for her is there. If she takes a chance on life, and takes a risk, and goes to the man that she loves and follows her heart, then her life will change forever. And that's kind of how I wrote it. Whether it was right, wrong, or indifferent, Jerry, I don't know, but that's how it flowed from me. And I would encourage everybody to trust their way of doing it. And this is fabulous to have a kind of structure to work with and to help yourself discipline. But you've got to let it come from your heart. Otherwise, why are we doing it? Why are we doing it?
Very nice. Excellent. And thank you for walking us through the process of how you wrote the book. And it pretty much kind of, synergizes with the way you create the framework right from an ordinary world to the return, with the call to adventure, the refusal, and all the ups and downs that you go through the story, which you kind of put together in a book or in a novel. So thank you for sharing that. Any closing insights that you want to share with all our participants who have joined us on Facebook Live? What are the life lessons, 3 life lessons that you can share with them, which would help them to kind of become better and improve their own lives, and of course improve on their self-esteem also?
Well, never give up. That is the first thing I've learned.
So be persevering, never give up, never give in, Be unstoppable, unshakable, unbreakable. All right, very
Be
nice, excellent.
persistent. Be persistent.
Yes, persistence is a part of being never giving up.
And
Persistence,
believing.
perseverance, and believing in yourself.
Believing.
Excellent. So that's lesson
Believing.
1. What is the lesson 2?
So lesson 2 is take what other people tell you, listen to it, but if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. That's quite a long lesson, but I've learned, I've been given advice over the years and mentors as well, and I've gone down that road and it's not been the right thing. But I had to learn that for myself, to trust my own intuition, to trust my own heart and what it was telling me.
Very nice. Thank you. And
Quite a
third,
long one, that one, sorry.
not to worry. Great. And the third lesson?
The third one is, learn to love yourself first and foremost.
Learn to love yourself. Yeah, it all starts with self-love, because only when you love yourself will others also be able to love you and relate with you. Very, very nice. Excellent. Annette Greenwood, thank you so much for making the time to join us today on the Experience Cool Convos with inspiring authors. It was brilliant to learn from your book, Imprisoned Heart, and from all the work that you do with the incarcerated women. And keep going strong and keep walking tall. And we look forward to having you at our live award function maybe this year. Since things are opening up, we plan to have a award ceremony in India this year, and hopefully you can join us for the award ceremony. So thank you, Annette Greenwood, and take care. Enjoy what is left of the weekend.
Thank you. It's been my great joy and pleasure to be here, Jerry, today. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. And thank you to everyone on Facebook Live for joining us on Facebook Live. Thank you. Have a good evening. See you. Bye-bye.